Caleb from Brownells here, and in today's video, or today's maintenance video, we're going to be going over how to clean an AK pattern firearm. And it's easy, you don't. So thanks for joining us, and we'll see. No, I'm just kidding. AKs are the gun that's like, oh, you don't have to, it's AK, it works fine. But honestly, it's still a mechanical device, it's a firearm, so you still have to clean it. You can't just not clean it. Alright, so with that being said, there are plenty of like videos on the internet of like people in like Russia and Afghanistan or wherever, and they just have these AKs that they never cleaned and they shoot and whatever. But if you clean your gun, it'll work better than a gun that's not clean, and it's just as simple as that. So with that being said, let's kind of just jump right into it. The AK we're going to be using here is a Zastava M70. It's a 7.62 by 39, just like standard. I say standard, not necessarily a standard pattern AK, because the M70s do have some minor differences and thicker receivers, so they don't take all aftermarket parts. But other than that, they are really a very solid AK that we sell here at Brownells. Alright, so first thing we need to do, make sure the firearm is indeed unloaded. So just pull the charging handle back, inspect the chamber. Obviously, if there was a magazine, we would remove that first. And then we'll repeat that step one more time. And then now we can start the disassembly. So to field strip this one, most AKs you just push this back plate in and then pull up the dust cover. Alright, so the difference is you have this button on the back right here. So we're going to push in the dust cover button on here on the back while simultaneously pushing in this little side button. Then with the dust cover one all the way depressed, we can release the side button, then release that dust cover one, and if you notice, it's not going to come back all the way because this one's now capturing it, so the dust cover falls right off. And then from here, we just take our recoil spring, push it forward, lift up, and pull out. We can set that aside. Take your bolts, carrier group and piston and all that stuff, that'll all come out together. As you can see, this one is very clean. This one is practically brand new. But we just take our bolts from the carrier, and if you push it back, it'll want to naturally rotate. Just let it rotate and then flip it over and pull it out. And then if you want to go a step further, you can also take off the gas tube here. So just lift up on this tab on the back, and yours may be pretty stiff. You can use some persuasion to get it to rotate, like a nylon tipped hammer or something like that. But if you flip it up, and it'll just lift right off. And that's pretty much as far as you need to go for a basic clean on an AK. So now we can actually get into the cleaning process. So what I like to do is just take a rag and some CLP, which I'll just have some break free here, and you can just kind of spray some in the rag and use that to just kind of wipe down the inside, get those rails, the face of that chamber, and just wipe the inside to the best of your ability here, just like this. It's super straightforward and easy. Alright. And then you can just kind of get in the front of that gas block there, clean that up a little bit. And if you have some carbon that's sticking, you can use just a brush, like an AP brush, which is like those green toothbrushes and stuff. Those work great. And let's see, I may have one here. I do have some steel wool. This comes in handy. I'll show you where that works as well. Alright. And you can put some COP on this as well. And use that to clean up those areas. And also anywhere you're starting to see some rust. If you see some rust, you can take a little bit of the CLP, put it on the steel wool, and just rub that rust right off. Alright. And that's pretty much all you have to do for the actual receiver portion of the firearm. We can move to the dust cover. Same thing on the dust cover. These don't get super filthy, but I mean you can just wipe out the inside of them. The biggest threat to these is honestly rust. So same thing with the recoil spring. You can take this assembly apart, but for basic maintenance you don't really need to. Just get a light coat of oil on them and wipe off any of the excess. The bolt, same exact thing. Just wipe it down. And this is one of those areas you may have to get the brush in on. And something you want to inspect, make sure your firing pin moves back and forth freely. You can see it on the back right there. You should be able to just gently touch it without any force and it go forward. And then on the front, where it protrudes, you should be able to do the same exact thing. So it should be floating freely in there. Something that can happen is the back of this firing pin, from being hit with the hammer so much, can actually become flared, especially on some of the lower quality ones. And what they'll do is whenever they go forward, they'll start to stick. So if you have that issue, you either want to replace that firing pin, which is highly recommended, or you can shave off that flare. If you absolutely have to have it and you don't have another firing pin, you can just take a file, or remove the firing pin, take a file, and fix that so that it moves freely. And then replace it as soon as possible after that. So that would be more of a field expedient. I say field expedient, you still gotta do some serious disassembly, but it's better than having a gun that doesn't work. Alright, so for the gas piston, same thing. Bolt carrier, same thing. Now, there is a little bit of play between the piston and the carrier. There's a little bit of wobble there. That's perfectly normal. It is pinned in place, and it is supposed to have a bit of play in it like that. That is, if yours is doing that, that's perfectly okay. And then you can take that piston, hit it with the brush. If you have some really stubborn stuff, you can take that steel wool and get on it like so. Alright, and then from here, the track where your bolt rides, clean that up. Alright. And then you have the tube portion here. What I like to do, and I don't necessarily do this every time I clean it, but one of the things I like to do is take a brush and the one I use, if I'm not mistaken, is a 20 gauge brush, and it fits in there perfectly. And put a little CLP on there. And just run that through. And then once I do that, I'll use a 20 gauge bore mop and just clean it up. And you can see that mop was white when we started and now it's dirty. Alright, perfect. That's all you need to do for that. Now we can move on to cleaning the barrel, and then we'll go into reassembly and lubrication. So what I'm going to do, using padded vice jaws, I'm just going to clamp this thing here. And I'll just grab it up front. Alright. So, because the actual bore is in line with, down in the receiver and stock area, we're going to come in from the front. And whenever you do this, you just have to be careful not to hit the crown. If you are super concerned about hitting the crown, you can just use a bore snake. Take a bore snake, drop it in through the rear, and pull it through. But for this, we're just going to be using a standard brush, and we're going to be mindful of the crown. Alright. And the biggest threat to the crown, or damaging the crown, is this transition right here of all this brass here. And I know steel's harder than brass, but because that right angle is such a small amount of steel, you can actually ding it. And we don't want to do that. So you're just going to run your brush through a handful of times. I know I did 2 here for demonstration purposes, but I usually go somewhere roughly around 10. How much depends on how dirty your gun is, honestly. Then we'll use a jag. Then we'll take a patch. That spear tip jag goes right through it. And then we're going to insert that. And push it all the way through. And we'll set that right there, you can see. We're going to repeat. And, I mean, this is an AK, alright? You don't have to keep running patches through and keep scrubbing until the patches come out perfectly white. You're just trying to get the bulk of the carbon and all that other junk out of there. And that's 2 patches, and it's obviously noticeably much cleaner. You can keep going if you want. Honestly, we're just going to stop right there. We knocked out the majority of the junk. Okay, so now we're going to go into cleaning and lubrication. So we're going to or not cleaning and lubrication, we just cleaned it. Reassembly and lubrication. Not in that order. Alright, so I'm going to be using, you can just use the CLP if you want. I like to put thicker grease on there because the AKs tend to run pretty dang hot, and a good thick grease is what stays on the best, stays in place. And you got to be smarter than me to open up this. There we go. Alright. So this is Brownells Action Lube Plus. If you watch any of the AR build videos or rifle or any of the build videos we do, I use the same stuff in this little tub here. And I put it on almost everything. But we're going to be using it in a syringe for this. Alright, first thing I lubricate, I'm going to come to my trigger group here, put my thumb over the hammer, pull the trigger to release the hammer, and then I'm going to lubricate it. So right now what I'm going to lubricate, I'm going to get this going here. Alright, I'm going to put some on the front of that disconnector. This is a brand new tube of this stuff, so when it first comes out it's a little juicier than it needs to be. But now I'm going to cock the hammer, and then I'm going to put some of this stuff on the left and right side, just like so. And then whenever I run the bolt and do my function check and stuff like that, that'll kind of get worked in there. So we're just going to set it right there for now. Alright. And then from here, I'm going to set this down. I'm going to go ahead and put this tube back on here. All you need to do, make sure this little switch is in the up position. Front end goes on first. The rear end drops in. Close this all the way into its detent spot, just like so. And that's all you got to do for that. Alright, now we're going to take this assembly here, and I'm actually just going to, on these rails, that's the rails that run in the receiver, I'm just going to grease those up pretty good. And I'm going to put a little bit right there. I'm going to put some in this raceway here where that bolt's going to rotate. Then I'm going to put the bolt in. So when I put the bolt in, if you notice, there's a curved face, but there's this big lug sticking off of it. That lug is what's going to go into that area we just lubricated, kind of. So you're going to rotate it that way and then go past that. And then in there, you'll notice, I just got that grease in there, but there's a pin that goes through your bolt. All right, that holds in your firing pin and your extractor. And that's going to rotate into that lug area. So that's where all that lubricant was for, right there. And then, so you have this lug on the side, and then you have this curved one. This curved one right here, you'll notice it looks like a ramp. That's what should be on the bottom, all right? It's curved that way so that it can clear the hammer, because back here it's going to cock the hammer down. And then this radius is there just so it can push it down and out of the way if it needs to. So that's why it's curved that way. All right, and then from here, we'll just simply put it back into the receiver. So the piston's going to go right above that barrel. And when you get to the back, you'll notice in the back of your receiver, your rails stop, and then it's open back here. So if you bring your bolt all the way, or your bolt carrier all the way back and push down, so you're pushing down, the reason it's springing right there is because it's pushing the hammer down. So push down and slide forward. Just like so. So I'll show you that one more time here. Alright, so bring it to the back and push down. Alright, and the bolt, that curved portion of the bolt's actually what's pushing down on the hammer. Alright, so we push forward, go all the way forward, and it should slam shut. Alright, recoil springs next. That goes in the top of that bolt carrier, all the way forward, and then slide it back where it came from in the rear there. I'll show you that again in just a second. Alright, so if you look at the back, there's rails on the back of this recoil spring piece. So we are going to slide those rails into there, and it's going to stop right there because of this button that we used on this M70 here. If yours doesn't have that, yours is just going to go all the way back, and that's fine. Alright, now we take our dust cover, set it in the groove on the front. So there's kind of a half moon, a crescent up front that this sits inside of. And then close the back all the way. And at this point, if you didn't have the rear takedown button, you would have to snap that dust cover close over the back of that recoil spring. But since we have that button, we just hold it shut and push it. And it'll snap back in place. And that is the reassembly. So now we'll just work that grease in there. Alright, and then what I like to do, because we lubricated that contact point on that between that hammer and trigger, I'll work that in. And then from here, I'll cock it, put the safety on, make sure that works fine, put it on fire, pull the trigger, hammer goes forward. While holding down the trigger, cycle it, make sure the trigger resets. Alright, and then that's all there is to it. That was the function test. So everything's good to go. If you have any questions, comments, anything like that, feel free to post them down below. And as always, if you need help with anything for any reason ever, or if you have a firearm you'd like to see a maintenance video done on, let us know in the comments. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.